You are listening to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our sponsor, MSP-Ignite. MSP-Ignite offers a peer group experience that is unique to managed service providers in the technology industry. If you are serious about implementing a model for success through sharing and collaboration of best practices, this is the best way to do it. Head on over to msp-ignite.com to get more information. All right, on to the show. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined again this week by Eric Hansen of Inland Productivity Solutions. Thanks for joining us, Eric.
Well, thanks for having me back again.
Back again. I think that when someone has a good idea for a podcast, ignoring it would fail our audience. So in this particular case, the voicemail you left me was to the effect of talking about the burden of risk sort of being balanced by insurance. And it was I'm saying this is a good segue from two episodes leading up to this one, which were all tied to, do I know what my client risk is? What's the risk to me as an MSP from a just good business? And then part two was we had the conversation around when I'm onboarding new clients, what types of risks am I willing to accept in this onboarding process before I feel that their scorecard puts them in a position of not being dangerous at best, catastrophic at worst.
Right. Well, I mean, when you first start talking to somebody, if they're worth a quote unquote good or decent MSP and they've just got a difference of opinion or, for whatever reason, the relationship's fallen apart. I think that's different than when you go into some place where, we just kind of been figuring it out on our own.
Right.
And, here we are. And, I have one of those opportunities in the next week or so. We're supposed to go and look at it. And it's like, I'm already scared. You don't have cyber insurance and you need to do CMMC. We got a pretty big bridge we got to cross here. And how do we get across that bridge without creating undue risk to our organization?
Well, I think that's the kicker. So let's break this down into two parts. One is I have insurance for my MSP, what that feasibly should cover, not necessarily in the world of the insurance company has decided it for us, but what we believe it either covers or should cover. And then I think there's the second part of the conversation, which is my clients don't even know how to have this conversation with me because I asked about insurance. Like, oh yeah, we have insurance. But
may I see it, please?
And when I say the word cyber insurance, do you assume that it's just the insurance policy you already have, or do you actually have something that would constitute being categorized as cyber insurance? So going back to that first one, I think this has been an ongoing discussion. It has been an ongoing topic, even if it wasn't the title of an episode for the past 30 plus episodes. It has come up. So help me out, because you started the conversation when you hit me up in voicemail to say, let's talk about this. It got me thinking, but I think you've got more of where this needs to go. So I'll start with you leading this, as I should have at the beginning. Yeah. Wait, I get to drive?
No. Yeah. Wait. Hey, you didn't tell me. I didn't bring my driver's license or my insurance card. I've spent a lot of time thinking about, with the events that we've had in the recent month and a half, because, I don't want to point out a vendor because God forbid it could be our vendor tomorrow. But, with what happened with the Kaseya situation, any of these guys, and I actually, it turns out I personally know at least one that was affected. There's no way they have enough insurance. There's just no way.
Yeah, there's a phrase that comes to mind. My enemy's enemy is my friend.
Yeah.
I might not have said that right, but that's kind of what we're seeing happening right now, right? Like this may not be a vendor that I necessarily cared about or was friends with or even wanted to ever use, but the reality is what pieces of what happened to them isn't going to happen potentially to somebody else that I do care about, right?
Right, right. No, for sure. Everybody who's, running a ConnectWise product or Synchro or, you name it. It doesn't matter who the name is. They've all got bugs.
Yeah, we could call it the
And
6 degrees of Thomas. I'm totally drawing a blank.
yeah, I don't know. I think it's the 1 degree of
They kind of
Kaseya
all go,
VSA.
yeah, they all kind of run upstream to somebody else's acquisition or investment. Or this is what I've said to everybody: I could care less who owns who. Um, these APIs that are getting used, who's writing them and who's checking them?
Right. Right. And yeah, and who's securing them?
Sure.
Because, if I want to, say I'm writing something, I can call up ConnectWise and I guarantee they'll just hand that API information right over because, yep, we want everything to connect to everything.
Well, so rewind. Back in the day, I used to use a PSA, much like you did, and I'll steer clear of what product it was. But I remember the amount of efforts we put into writing our own scripts to connect to certain portions of our PSA. And some of those scripts later went on to be, those were available and suddenly I can get them from ConnectWise. And we built those originally for our own internal use in our on-prem instance. And we see this elsewhere, right? The cloud space. Well, if I cram what was on-prem into my cloud instance, then I'm covered because the tool works in both places. Therefore, I should use the tool. And I realize that we're going off on a tangent, but I think it has a lot to do with insurance, because if the insurance company doesn't know the reach that your products and services have that you've called your own that are inside your company's instance, this is where I started thinking about it over the weekend as it pertains to what will my insurance cover versus what they're going to indemnify themselves from, because they're going to say, no, 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 no. That's where that product, which got put into the equation, and we can't help you there.
Yeah. Yeah. This product ends here, or our
Right.
responsibility for this product, ends here, and you went past here.
And I think we have to remember that with any vendor, that there is a level of responsibility that they have, but how far it reaches, most of us have never asked the question, so shame on us. And even if they're insurance, or even if they do go even in the ballpark of where we think they should, is that still shame on us, because we're responsible for what we put into our own environment, no matter how much we trust the vendor's products we bought.
Oh, sure. It's at the end of the day, you have the same problem for customers. They hire us to take care of their stuff.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if their stuff gets encrypted or stolen, is sent off to the dark web for the viewing of all the quality people who are looking for that. At the end of the day, it really is their problem.
Right.
They're going to make it our problem.
Right.
But at the end of the day, it's their business problem. And this is one of those areas where I think, and this was kind of the genesis of that call, I think, was, we're now going to clients and, if you don't have cyber, maybe you don't need to be a client.
It's knowing to hold them,
because you don't
under.
Right. Well, and you, Mr. Customer, don't really understand your risk if you're not. If you are saying, well, yeah, I don't think I have it, but you've done the analysis. Well, okay, maybe you think you don't have that risk. You apparently don't use the internet. Or live in the modern world, and maybe that's true. Maybe you're running QuickBooks, 96 on, or I guess they didn't even have years on it back then, right? I think QuickBooks 99 was the first one.
Primavera P6, I think, has been around since 2004.
Well, hey, but I can get that to run on Windows 10, so that is a modern product.
It's been modernized. I think that's like where you swap out the 8-track player for a CD player. I think that's that modernization piece. Still looks the same on the outside.
There you go. I can make it look like whatever
That's
you
right.
want.
That's right.
But it's something that I think MSPs really need to come to grips with much sooner than later. Especially with the stuff we're seeing with Travelers seems to be the one that keeps getting called out because
right.
they've been the one going out and canceling people and sending out, hey, you must use multi-factor authentication on your switch that
right.
doesn't know how to do that.
Okay, so you hinted at the client part. We've hinted at the client side of this a lot because I think it is fundamentally part of the me MSP part. I'd like to touch on for a minute. As an MSP, let's just say I've got 100 clients. And I think the reality is, if I think about an insurance company insuring the MSP, it's not necessarily all about the verticals that those clients are in. It's really about the model as an MSP that you have in place that say steps through that says, under no circumstances am I going to take that sensitive client or that risky client and have it compromise what I've worked so hard for with my portfolio of clients. So I think you could go and sit with your insurance broker or an insurance company, and depending on what you can produce as far as evidence on how you run your business and how you secure and manage your clients, that there's a level of assurance that insurance company is seeing going, hey, this is what I want in our portfolio of who we're insuring, because of what they're can't predict the future, right? But they can at least say, this looks sound.
At least they're trying pretty hard.
Right. Because you hinted at maybe I should not even consider this because they don't know what cyber insurance means. And then you brought up the whole questionnaire of like 2FA on the switch and some of these other things that aren't even physically possible that, makes me think we should be contributing more to the conversation. But what I'm concerned about overall as the MSP and looking at this is going, what should we be getting insured for? Are we an insurable industry to begin with, considering the way we're targeted? Like is there hope for this?
Yeah, well, I think we have to think about or understand, what are the limits of this cyber policy? At the end of the day, I can't buy enough insurance to cover your risk.
Right.
Mr. Customer, you need to cover your risk, and you need to understand that no matter who your IT services company is we're all in this together.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we're all in this together, and it doesn't matter who that IT company is. I would argue to a degree it probably does matter a little bit, but it doesn't really matter who that IT company is. They have risk. Certainly, some are far more risky than others. The IT companies that are not, following best practices internally. It's such a colossal pain in the butt for me to even log into a workstation in my office now. It's like, well, why do you do that? Because I have to.
Yeah,
and I don't know that even protects me from the risk. If there's some weird SQL injection attack that happens to be exploited against my RMM, have all the things that we've done to mitigate it, minimize the risk. Well, yeah, but it still, all it did was minimize the risk. It didn't make it go away.
So there's a spend trend happening 2021, 8% budget more, or an 8% increase in budget will be allocated to cybersecurity and operational security in literally every vertical because of recent events. One of the things I was curious about to get your thoughts on is that enough? Are we doing sort of the same thing again, where we're like, I'm willing to part with 4%. That's what feels okay to me. Because they're still using that mindset, like it's not ever going to happen to me.
And I'm too small. I'm not interesting.
And so I look at this through two lenses. One, I saw a statistic that was showing the top 3 most heavily hit industries were education, healthcare, and well, those were the top two. And then the third, I can't remember what the third one was, but those were the top two. And I'm like, okay, that's a no-brainer. Then you look at like an increase in 8%, and I'm like, well, those are two verticals that don't have 8% to spend on security in the first place. So
but they need to find it.
right, absolutely. And it kind of comes back to this whole thing that says, okay, if I am the one that is that risk to the MSP, am I going to be able to get an MSP here in the near future if we can't, at least to your point, participate as this is a joint effort? Because then I think it's less about money on my part, spending, and more about the education on my part and the spend on your part in some cases. Like you've put the effort in to say this is the stack you're buying, and maybe it doesn't change my cost a whole lot from what I'm buying from you, but if I'm not recognizing, appreciating, and allowing you to actually put that stuff into my environment, truly control it, not the, well, Chris said he's got to be admin profile because he can't be logging into two different instances. That had to spend on my but that wasn't a cost that I had to spend money on. So in this 8% of budgeting, I started thinking about budget allocation based on FTE resources being consumed to educate, which is where I feel like is failing right now. So MSPs feel the strain of educating me as the customer, and yet it's not your responsibility to educate me. It just seems that you're the only ones out there that are equipped to educate those of us that need those services.
Well, sure. At the end of the day, I think a lot of customers don't know they need those services. Right. Don't understand they need that education. And I think a lot of MSPs are not spending enough effort there. We've been over the last, I'll call it 10 years, so engineered by vendors, and, pick whoever you want the devil to be. We've been so educated by vendors that, well, you need to do this because you need to be at this utilization number. You need this, you need that, because this is the only way your business is worth anything. And, and everybody's plan is an exit plan, 2 years from now.
So is that the insurance question? Like, because I feel like, why is that not being asked on my insurance form? Like, hey, has your staff gone through cybersecurity training in the last year? Question mark. Yes, no.
I have seen that question a couple of times.
Okay.
But it is not every place.
Which then leads to, do you educate, or do you make sure that your clients are being educated on their cybersecurity responsibilities, if nothing more?
Right. So, in our case, we do. If we can get them to do it, we do it. And we do it live. We go out, and there's nothing beats the, going out and sit in a room with people. And, that way you can see when somebody's not getting it. And all of our larger clients have had at least one in-person, hour with no more than 15 people or so in the room at a time. Even if we have to do the same dog and pony show, 3 or 4 times.
Even, however many times.
However many times it takes. Because at the end of the day, I can't buy enough technology, just like I can't buy enough insurance to cover their risk. I can't buy enough technology to ensure that it will never happen.
It's funny enough. I did a professional development a few months back. It was like right before school got out for a bunch of teachers, and I gave the presentation on password vulnerability and the importance of better passwords. And I was leading up to why multi-factor is important, and like, this is coming. You're going to have to do it across a lot of different things, even if you're not on some things now. And man, I got so much pushback until I pulled up my favorite crappy passwords used in this year. So I show all these passwords to them, and I got all kinds of laughter in the room. And I did this session like 4 or 5 times. Laughter every time. And then I go, these were your passwords that were compromised. They're like, wait, what? Like, yeah, these passwords, I didn't go look up your password. I don't even have that kind of power. I literally went and found on the database that was leaked on the dark web that these are passwords that are being used in this environment. man, it was crickets. And then they're like, we had no, what do we do? And so to your point, like, but where's the burden of responsibility? Because you said it's a shared opportunity. And so right now, what I feel is happening, and correct me if I'm wrong, our insurance companies are asking questions, but they're not providing guidance.
Because I don't think they have the answer. I think
Right.
what they're doing is they're looking at their loss runs and going, okay, well, it looks like this thing would have prevented it. If they'd had multi-factor authentication on their terminal server that was directly exposed to the internet, then this terminal server wouldn't have been compromised. So I'm going to add that to my list of requirements. You must
Sure.
have multi-factor authentication.
So
If there was and if one piece of multi-factor authentication is good, then more must be better.
right. So
I
want to ask a question then right there before we transition to say more looking at the client side. If that's the case, and MSPs are burdening with how much insurance to carry, how much will they even be covered regardless, is it not a fair question to say, hey, why are the insurance companies at this point not willing to get MSPs in a room and start asking questions and say, hey, these things are happening. Can you help us understand so that we can write the right questions with the right writers to help you be successful? Because at the end of the day, while we don't want to pay out claims, you also don't want to spend more on a policy that you're not going to get paid out on anyway.
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's like all insurance. I don't ever want to actually have to use it. I'm not happy paying for it, but I really don't ever want to have to use it because there's going to be some.
We have an industry right now, though, that says, I have an insurance policy for that. By and large, how many times have you heard another MSP say, well, that's why we have insurance? I'm not buying more technology because my insurance policy will help me rebuild in the event that happens.
I hope. Right. They're leaving that part out. I hope.
Fill in the blank. I screwed. Yeah.
Yeah. And hope is not a strategy. But yeah, to think, as an MSP to think, well, I got insurance for it, it'll be okay. Sure. I think is really just kind of burying your head in the sand and not productive towards what you're trying to do. And having that voice with the insurance companies is difficult because an underwriter can't actually talk to an insured in most cases because the underwriter isn't licensed as an insurance agent. And so the underwriter can't have that direct conversation with us, even if they're not the underwriter for whoever our insurance is written with.
So basically the in-between is where the conversation has to start because it can't be a direct conversation based on the way insurance is currently structured.
Yeah, for legal reasons,
right.
It's not structured that way.
And I kind of get that too. Like the number of times that I've actually wanted to have a conversation with the actual underwriter has been nil because they're taking their input from whether or not the agents are making good recommendations for who they should cover.
Well, they're doing that, and they're looking at loss runs. Okay, what are we paying? We were involved in a recovery 3 years ago. Yeah, that I was frankly stunned at what the insurance company was willing to pay for. I was shocked, and I don't think it would go down the same way today.
Yeah, right.
It would look completely different. We did the incident response. We wouldn't be doing the incident response now.
Right. There'd be a forensics investigator that's probably different from the company that's providing SOC services. The list goes on and on and on. Here's your legal team. They are being assigned to you because we're the insurance company and we're telling you what to do.
Right. Yeah. You're now a passenger on this ship.
So along those same lines, I actually went through almost the exact same thing. Client has no insurance to cover this. They called their the recommended insurance company and literally were dictated to and rolled out an entire like army of people that they're paying out of their ears, nose, wherever they can get money to come out of to go through and investigate this ransomware incident. They're spending money hand over fist on technology and services right now to solve the unsolvable. So I'm now spending all my time trying to help them understand that no, this is about reduction in risk, not remediate or not removal of risk. And they're really struggling. They're grappling with that, going, but wait, all this happened and it could have been avoided. I'm like, you're right, it could have been avoided, but we don't know if it was avoidable. Could have is not the same as avoided, right? Like,
Right.
did you do
Woulda,
enough?
coulda, shoulda.
No, right. What could have, should have. Hindsight's always 2020, right? So as we segue to the client part, which is where we get the most resistance, what's the like we talked about this a little bit. How do we help the client with this, grapple with this insurance decision, or recognize that the decision that they've made isn't necessarily going to help them with where,
With what their actual risk is?
With the behavior.
Well, I think that a part of that is for us acting as professional IT service providers. We need to be making it a requirement that there is some mitigation of their risk, and educating them to understand that, look, your risk is different than you perceive it. To think that I have an IT company, doesn't matter who it is, they've got it all covered.
Yeah.
Is silly. But they don't really recognize that, because that's how it's always been, until we really started to see this uptick in ransomware and, dare I say, things that are beyond ransomware,
right.
Oh geez, the word is completely escaping me that I'm looking for. But as soon as they're exfiltrating data, and now they got your data, we had one where we thought that had happened, and they had actually only harvested, oh, look, I got this many SQL databases, and I got this many Word files, and I got this many Excel files. Not that they had actually taken them, but that they had encrypted them. Today, we know that they're getting in there. If they get in there, they're going to spend some time poking around, figure out what's there, potentially move that interesting data out so that they've got an additional lever to use to make sure that you pay for the hostage to get your kids back.
Well, it's not that your data is very valuable by itself, right? It's when my data gets combined with your data, and all of a sudden they're looking at a footprint that goes, wow, Chris knows the same people that Eric knows, and we pulled these from two different databases, and now we're able to mesh them together. And now we're able to use that as a way to circumvent, because there's a trust factor when I communicate as if I was one of those people, that the person I'm targeting has no idea that they're not being targeted by that actual person.
Right.
And that's a very small example of what's a much larger, like the LinkedIn database being compromised, the way they described it with what was in it. Yeah, that's all data that we have available publicly on LinkedIn. But you know what? You can't get to it without using a search in LinkedIn. Now you have a database that you can run 1,000 different queries any way you want against the data to find things that have nothing to do with what LinkedIn's actually focused on tracking. But now you have access to it. Like I remember the Facebook had their API where I think now there's a widget or a thing in Facebook where it'll tell you when there's friends near me. Well, 10 years ago, I had a colleague of mine, he wrote a script for fun for college that allowed him to literally do this little pop-up on the screen, and it would tell him everybody that he knows, and he could pick the distance away from where he was standing. Facebook shut that down real quick because that was not how they wanted their database to be used. More importantly, they didn't want people to know that level of information was accessible through the API on the back end.
Right. And that they were collecting all the pieces of Humpty Dumpty to be able to do that.
So last question on the client side that I think is even circles back to the IT side. Do you think it's something realistic in our near future to see where, as an MSP, that you could have somebody or multiple people on your staff be trained like they would as an insurance agent. Like if you think about it like PCI compliance, there's different levels of registered PCI implementers and PCI, like that we could see something along those lines to help both the MSP, their clients, and the insurance companies, all three be successful, because no one wants ransomware to happen in that circle of that triangle. But the reality is there's pieces of what needs to happen that are very difficult to get to because of the current structure in our legal system.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a couple of problems. What are the barriers to entry to this business? There aren't any.
Right.
That's a little bit of an exaggeration. You probably, need to have a
Car,
couple of grand on a car. Yeah.
and a laptop.
I got a laptop and some business cards and a car.
And I got a CD binder that's got all my password cracking tools for Windows.
Right. And all of my unsavory software that I carry around.
My pirated Windows keys. Yeah.
Right. Those, unsavory Windows keys.
Yeah.
This one, Microsoft hasn't found out this one's getting activated all over creation.
Sure.
Yeah.
Right. They can't tell.
Right. That I think to some degree that piece has gone away, but I mean, it goes to the professionalism in our industry.
Sure.
And how does an end user customer know? Right. Guy seems competent enough, makes everything work, must be okay. Doesn't mean that, they're doing everything the way they should be. And how many places still are running unlicensed, copies of operating systems or Office applications because, the guy put it on there,
Well, let's even use the argument that it's not the unsavory scenario. Let's look at it through the lens of, I have that application that hasn't been updated because there is no update. We're running Windows. I mean, like there's all these things that are on both sides of this fence, if you will. The whole thing.
I've been running this because it's worked for the last 15 years.
It goes back to two things. One, the education piece. And then the second piece is, you said it. If you and I are two MSPs and we both walk away from the same client, we need the other 8 MSPs that they're going to call next to also walk away. Because if they're not willing to walk away, we end up repeating the process of having bad scenarios playing out over and over and over again because no one's willing to say no to money. That's essentially what it boils down to, right? I'm saying this headache's worth it for the amount of money you'll write me a check for. But, oh, by the way, don't change anything in my environment. I'm happy with the way things work. You're a checkbox. I need to be able to call somebody when I can't print from my home computer. It's operational IT.
Well, right. And unfortunately, as much as I would like to think and be on the side of what the deal that Carl's doing, that Carl Palachuk's doing with the what is it, the National Association of IT Service Providers, trying to get a little bit of play with the legislators so that we don't get some crazy legislation that is untenable for everybody. There will always be the 20-year-old kid that, is a trunk, what Arnie Bellini a billion years ago called a trunk slammer. They're just driving around fixing stuff. And those guys will always be around. I was at a networking event Wednesday talking to a guy who's, I know what his business does. I've gone and looked at it. I've gone, oh, hell no, I'm not touching that.
But I think trunk slammers is somewhat of a badge of honor for those that truly are good at what they do, because I think a trunk slammer, in the way Arnie was referring to it, is someone who is getting paid to fix the here and now. But I think that there's the other side of it, and I call it the lifestyle MSP. So as long as maybe I have 3 clients, but if I'm making $185,000 a year and I'm doing a good job with those clients, I don't necessarily need to be right? The problem is when, from the client perspective, I think is the critical piece is what happens if hit by bus? What happens if ransomware? What happens if, you took the whole thing out of the equation all at once because it was one person?
Yeah.
So,
I dealt with one of those like 8 months ago.
right.
Guy,
So
he wasn't hit by a bus, but he dropped dead. He was it.
I I probably know who you're referring to, but that's neither here nor there. So to wrap this up, though, you bring up something that's really important. I'd love to hear feedback, both off the show and on LinkedIn. The idea of the National Society of IT Service Providers. Our Carl Polachek has gotten heavily involved with it. There's other vendors that have gotten involved. I'm curious to hear what you guys think about it. Eric, is there anything else that you think that the audience, that our members need to hear with regards to this cyber insurance that we all desperately want to understand when we need to get the payout, but really don't want to understand any more than that check that's being written when it's not a payout? And because it's more than about education, it's more than our responsibility to educate the client, because they've been buying insurance for cars and everything else for years. How is it that they're missing the boat on this right now?
Because they don't understand the risk. And I think
there it is.
And the end client, you're whoever you're supporting, they don't understand the risk unless they've been down the road. So we've got a couple clients that understand the risk now.
Right.
But unless they've
Funny
been
how
down that
fear
road,
and ransom are a really good combination to give somebody an open purse.
a wake up call that, hey, maybe I do need to spend this $5,000 or whatever it turns out to be for, in their instance, small and medium business. It's money and nobody likes to spend it, but it's not that much money. And same goes for us in the IT service provider space. I think we need to have a good understanding of just what is that policy going to help with. God forbid we have to make that call, because it's not designed, that policy is absolutely not designed to cover your customer's risk.
Right.
It is designed to cover your risk. And while you can, go to your customer and say, look, I'm going to do everything I can to minimize your risk.
Right.
Or everything that I understand how to do to minimize your risk. What I'm aware of today, to minimize your risk, doesn't mean that I didn't miss something. But that minimization of risk, you can only go so far, and you need to understand and make your customers understand. Look, this is not a risk we've ever had in business. 5 years ago, we weren't having this conversation. Hell, 2 years ago, we weren't having this conversation, and we should have been. But that's when all the insurance companies were really learning about, okay, what's this take to recover from? Now they've got much better stuff in hand to deal with it.
Right.
But that's a one-time event. I'm pretty sure when you go back to renew that policy or shop that policy someplace else, and have you had a cyber event, and was there a payout? Once they get that loss run, that's going to be an ugly number, because the margin on the insurance continues to shrink, and it's
right.
It's shrinking awfully close to, there's not enough meat on the bone, which means either the insurance companies exit the business or it gets a lot more expensive than
I'll give one other example before we close this out that's right along the lines of what you're saying. So I had insurance. I won't name the carrier. This is back first few years of me running my own company. We got sued based on a delivery of a product that failed to meet some imaginary deadline that no one knew about. And after the lawsuit had been filed and we got the phone call saying, hey, we're suing you or else kind of thing, they literally said, I don't understand why you're not just calling your insurance company to pay the insurance claim of saying that this had happened. And we're like, because we didn't do anything wrong. We don't want to not be able to ever get insurance again because we paid this out. This was 10 years ago. Like, this isn't any different. It's just a different category. And we've got to come to the grips with the fact that you don't want to use it just because it's there.
Just because you have it. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, yeah. And the fear of litigation, I think, there are certainly industries where, yeah, we just litigate everything. Let's write a contract, but it'll be meaningless. We'll litigate it anyway.
So funny enough, this is running longer than a normal episode. Surprise. I want to throw this out there too, because we're talking about it. There's always the possibility in a ransomware event or some sort of like hacking event, data compromise, you name it, that you could incur civil penalties or have litigation carried out against you from a client. What's really interesting that's just came out in some state legislation, Ohio, Utah, and Connecticut have all passed state laws saying you've got safe harbor as a business if you can show alignment with CIS version 8. So we talk about the amount of money you can spend on technologies and tools and the things that we can do to educate our clients or even internally educate ourselves. If you can prove compliance and you're in those 3 states, obviously great. I would argue that if you do it and you're not in one of those states, there's a good chance that by the time, God forbid it happened to you, I would be shocked if we don't see a lot more states come alongside real quick and adopt that same law.
Yeah. Well, no, I think there is legislation and laws coming to this industry way faster than anybody thinks.
Yep.
I would think
Finally.
we will be a regulated industry in some way, shape, or form in nearly every state within the next 2 years.
So Eric,
and frankly, we should be.
Yeah, as an MSP, Eric, we should talk offline. I've got some products and services that can help you with your CIS version 8 compliance. For those of you that are listening, yep, that was a plug. I'm not saying I even have the bandwidth, but I'll let you know if you want to have a 15-minute or 30-minute conversation on some resources on where to get started, shoot me an email, chris@pinpointsolutions.com. I'd be happy to share with you what little I do know to get you started. I'll tell you why CIS 8. It's sequential. It doesn't start at some random control. It will walk you through it. It's probably one of the most widely shared resource out there. It's not behind cloak and dagger. You got to pay money to see it. So that's a wrap on MSP 1337. This has been a great episode because I have, again, Eric Hansen of Inland Productivity. For those of you listening, thanks and have a great week.
Thanks, Chris.